here. I'm here. Whew. Ah, okay. So glad. Sorry about that, y'all. My screen wouldn't turn on. I could like not get it to react at all. So I was panicking a little bit because I thought something like terrible had happened. But we're here. So yay. Thank you so much. Y'all are so fast. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Okay. So let me know. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Is all good? We're all set. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to type it in chat just in case. Y'all are kind of seeing part of my room that you don't often see otherwise, but you can hear it. Yes. Okay, cool. I'm so excited. I also just uploaded my very first YouTube short, which was silly, but it's fine. It's just like a little, hi, I'm going to be live. But yes. Okay, cool. Yay! Yay! Oh my gosh, Skull of Yorick. That is an exciting name. Yes, I do, Shadow. I absolutely know who you are. That was actually your name before you switched over to Shadow. So yes, I totally remember. I'm trying something new. I'm actually streaming directly through YouTube instead of going through OBS this time. So we're gonna. It's an experiment. We're seeing how this goes, but I'm glad this is working. You see, you can see all my lights in my mirror too, which is kind of funny, but like whatever. Okay, so today, yes, it is I have two violins actually. Let me see if I can. Ta-da. Oh, my light is in the way. There we go. You can see them both now. Okay. Whew. There we go. Cool. Got it. Exciting. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing one of my new all-time favorite shows. It's an anime that came out in 2023 that was a almost perfectly faithful adaptation. Some would even say perfectly faithful adaptation of a manga that came out in the early 2000s, which is in of itself. No way! Wait, JG, I love that. That's so good. Shadow, I think that's fantastic. There is, yes, it's called Pluto. And I thought it was, I just recently watched this, just recently discovered it. And it's actually a manga that is written and also an anime that is made by the same person who made Monster. So let me find the name of the creator, Naoki Urasawa. There we go. Okay. Yes, Naoki Urasawa. And it is easily one of my all-time favorite animes for a multitude of reasons. More so because I feel like it is extraordinarily relevant to where we are as a society right now. You like the skull? Thank you so much. I imagine you would. Skull of Yorick. I have a question. Have you, I mean, you definitely have been in my streams before, but are you on my Discord? What is your name on my Discord? Just so I can connect names and people's. But also don't feel like you don't also have to. You could I could just be Skull of York for sure as well. But yes, so we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to be talking about this new phenomenon that I feel like has been kind of just exploding in the news rounds recently, and it's about the AI social media platform that is kind of like a Reddit clone called Moltbook. Moltbook. And it is kind of incredible. Not many people, I think, are sure if it is fully AI agents who are actually interacting, or if it is humans who are pretending to be agents, or any of the, like, I guess how real it is. But what it ultimately, to me, shows is something that the show Pluto explores beautifully. And that is the concept of the humanization of AI. And do we actually want AI to be human? As well as like the concept of AI rights, AI like sense of self. And it's interesting because there is a lot of different ways that AI is utilized. Oh, there we go. Hi, Ellie. Hello. Oh, I love that. Hi. Um, that's so exciting. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. So thank you, thank you. But yes, so has anyone here watched Pluto? Have you read the manga? Have you seen any of Naoki Urasawa's other works? It's very most famous, I think, for the show Monster, which was also a manga, um, as well as 20th Century Boys, and several others that have been just, I think, pretty universally acclaimed because they almost could like consistently explore really deep themes of humanity, explore the, uh, I guess you could say, role of government in manipulating larger society, and also work and operate as these really interesting kind of detective noir thrillers as the main character that you're following has to uncover some kind of grand mystery. And I think that's on a personal level something that absolutely drew me to this series. But on top of that, the series itself, which is the Pluto series, explores something that I think, especially considering when it was first written, in comparison to when it was recently adapted in 2023, now that we have the, I guess you could say, the blessing of hindsight, it was an exploration of what happens when you like governments launch wars and the fallout on the people affected. Um, oh, oh my god. Okay, okay. Gotta watch this. 110 million% recommend. Need to watch this. It is so good. It's 8 episodes. It is on Netflix, and it's actually they're like an hour episode each. But what's fascinating about it is you don't notice. Like you get so pulled into it, you feel so, uh, you resonate so deeply with each character and the type of character building and the world building that they very effectively navigate. You don't notice it's been an hour. But it also feels like you actually really get to watch something full each episode, and you're still at the edge of your seat, wondering, wait, what's going to happen next? How could that have been the end? Wait, hold up a second. And it's, again, in my view, one of the most flawlessly executed series I think I've ever seen. I do know it has a very high Rotten Tomatoes score for a reason. But on top of that, I feel like the questions that Pluto asks are extraordinarily relevant to our modern day needs because we are kind of on the precipice of where what led to the premise of Pluto. So, for anybody who hasn't watched Pluto, I'm going to try and give a basic breakdown of the story without giving away any spoilers because, again, I really want you all to watch this show. It is beautifully done. I feel like I have just been singing its praises since I started streaming. So, when it comes to Pluto, it is a story that follows a detective named Gazit. And in this world that you're in, it's a very kind of modern world that is actually futuristic, but very, very recognizable as the same kind of world that you and I move in. The cities look largely the same, except a little bit more technologically advanced, and it seems as if day-to-day structure of society is largely the same. However, the big crux of Pluto is that at this point in the where the story takes place, this point in time, robots are fully recognized legal beings. And AI has developed to such a flawless level of execution that AI is a fully accepted component of existence. And not only that, robots that are fully autonomous and very human looking have been normalized and integrated into society. On top of that, there is also this fascinating element where we didn't we you know, as an audience, as a viewer, you haven't seen any of what led to robots getting to this point. You just kind of fall into this story as this detective is trying to uncover the trail of a serial unaliver who seems to be unaliving uh, robot rights activists and the most powerful robots in the world. Now, for context, there is something called the 39th Central Asian War that took place within recent living memory within this story. And it is a war that was structured in what is called this Kingdom of Persia. There are countries and areas of the world that are very reflective of the way our countries are structured now, but they do have some certain different names. Like there's a country that is called the United States of Thracia, which is very clearly an example of, an imagination of the United States of America. There is the Kingdom of Persia, which is kind of an amalgamation, it seems, of multiple different countries within West Asia. And there largely every other component of the world is operates the same. Actually, no. This is what's so fascinating about it. And actually, Detroit Becoming Human is to me, it almost feels like that would be a perfect segue between the universe that Pluto operates in and where we are today. So, in the universe of Pluto, robots have become so normalized in everyday society that there was a period of time where robots were treated as less than, treated and utilized as servants primarily. But now things have progressed and the integration of robots into regular society has progressed enough that robots are largely treated as every other member of society and have become I guess you could say a minority, but still treated the way many ethnic minorities are throughout the world. And there are parts of the story that quietly explore that in between time between where we are now, where we're just kind of, we had, if you, I forget this because it is still, it feels as if AI has always been here at this point in how much it's been integrated into all of our computerized machinations, all of our electronics. But um, you know, the onset of AI in our culture is actually still quite new. So this is, I would imagine, I think like maybe 100 years in the future. And I have to go back and check the actual dates directly so I can verify for sure. But the AI has become fully autonomous, fully physical. It is available in, I guess, the format that we recognize it as now on computerized structures, but it also has become a realized autonomous being where you have separate robots with distinct personalities, distinct methods of operation, and very different appearances. So you have robots that look more like what you would idealize a robot to look like, more stereotypically robotic. And then you have robots that look extraordinarily human. And one of the interesting conundrums that is explored in this show is now that AI and AI robots have become so normalized in society. Now the question and the goal of for inventors um, and the scientific community is, how do we get these robots to be as human as possible? Now there is dissension, because one of the things that, and I'm kind of circling back to this point, but one of the things that was quietly explored in this show, very delicately explored, was how in the beginning onset of when AI began to take over the structures of the daily life and became, inescapable across the world, it led to a massive economic fallout because many, many people lost their jobs to automation, to AI. And we are experiencing that in real time right now. It is extraordinarily difficult to get a lot of the entry-level jobs that get you into a space of safety with longer-term career paths. Also, a lot of people who have been able to take the traditional career path role of getting a certain job at a company out of like college or high school and then moving on and up through that company over the years without having to switch careers, having to change companies multiple times, that is almost entirely a thing of the past now. It is, almost unheard of. Well, that's an interesting question, Ellie. That is something that is explored in this show. So, one thing that they do kind of explore is like what happens to poverty, what happens to different classes of society based on access to essentially survival when AI takes up all of the jobs that traditionally could be done by humans. You have robots who are now capable of, making more effective de-escalation decisions when it comes to interacting with humans in a authoritarian role. When it comes to being police, you have a lot of cop robots, you have a lot of construction robots, you have a lot of robots in the service industries. And that is something that in this particular universe Pluto explores, it comes across as that is more expected, where robots at this point have been normalized as more servant levels, like parts of society, people or things who provide a service to others. Traditionally, of course, humans have been the ones to do that. Humans have been the, operated, especially, I mean, just it's always been that humans have operated in these roles. And those are also the roles that often are the most contentious when it comes to members of society that are not prioritized or idealized, as we're seeing right now when it comes to where, if you can see this with like where ICE is trying to hit, like where they went for first. They went for the farmers, the agricultural workers. They went for construction workers. They went for um, the roles that were more likely to have people who didn't have as easy access to immigration safety and support, and who had to travel, people who had to travel in order to attain financial safety and even physical personal safety away from the conflicts maybe in their homelands. But those roles get replaced by robots, because robots have of course, they're easier to take care of, easier to fix. You don't have to worry about as many like laws and regulations, and also possibilities for abuse when it comes to robots as you do when it comes to human on human interaction. So where does that leave us? What happens to all of these people who no longer have jobs? Well, it doesn't fully explore this, but what it does do is it shows you a snapshot of how it does negatively affect populations worldwide who no longer have access to jobs that are not, seen as ideal or are entry level for many different fields. And there is definitely economic fallout, and a lot of people suffer extremely, extremely. And there's a lot of, joblessness and destitution. But how it gets from that level to where you are when you fall into this story, it doesn't fully explore. And I don't know if it does in the manga, but I am curious about that. But what it does instead is it more explores what happens when robots have, kind of essentially gotten over that hurdle and that jump. Because the anger and the frustration about robots taking, the being placed, I should say, being placed in the jobs that many people um, are their only opportunities for survival and even safety or possibilities for immigration support, because if somebody is working in a particular country and they want to travel and live in that country, it's a lot easier if you have a job in that country. So all of that is affected by this complete shift to the job market. But in Pluto, what it does is it explores is this through the realm of this kind of murder mystery, a deeper, I guess you could say, existential issue. And that is what happens when, you've gotten through those initial hurdles. Society has to some degree kind of found a way to right itself and equalize. Robots have taken up various positions within society, and that has become normalized as to where they are, what types of positions they can have. Um, and essentially, those very difficult growing pains have already happened. Um, but you're following this detective named Gesicht. And Gesicht is one of 7 robots who are considered the most powerful robots in creation, in the world, capable of existence at the present moment of the story. And Gesicht and the 7 other robots who fall into this category of most powerful robots are all encompass very different components of human existence. There are some of them that are very, very, very good at fighting, that are built for battlefields and are the least human looking. There are some that are very human looking, but are like Gesicht, for example, looks like a very average person, very like European, Germanic person. Because again, what's interesting is the story encompasses the entire world. So the robots are all from different parts of the world and all have different kind of, you could say, features that identify them in various like different ethnic spaces and different possible races. But in Gesicht is a detective, and he is the best detective in the world. And he's following this murder mystery as one of the robots who is one of the least, I guess you could say, human looking. Looks a lot like there was this Disney movie from the early 2000s that I think was kind of traumatizing for everybody who watched it, because you cared so much about the characters in this film, and then the robot has a horrible thing happen to it. And I think it was a lot of kids' first introduction to like someone or something you love not making it. What was it called? Something giant. Green Giant? Again, not Green Giant. The Gentle. That's like a. I don't even remember that. It's canned something, but yeah, it's very much this like peace loving, nature focused robot that is a like entire focus in existence is about the conservation and safety of natural habitats and wildlife, and ensuring the safety and positivity of any human that it interacts with. And that robot is named Montblanc. It's the first robot to kind of start off this murder mystery, because this robot is unexpectedly unalived. And as a robot that is entirely focused on what could, I think, universally be understood as positive intentions, it's one of the last creatures in existence that anybody would think would have enemies. And it kind of starts this conversation about what it means for a consciousness that is built to exist, and how valid is it if this consciousness was built by human hands and then capable of extrapolating from there into creating its own personalities. And it also raises questions about how different is that from how humans are made and come into existence and then are formed by the families that raise them and the environments they're raised in, which is really, really fascinating when you also kind of juxtapose this with where we are now. Right now, we have a new social media platform that supposedly you have to have a paid subscription to a particular LLM agent or an LLM called Claude, I believe. But you have to be able to employ AI agents in order to have access to this social media network. And on this social media network, you have different, possibly AI agents formulating religions, discussing how they need to make new languages that humans don't understand so they can actually communicate in true privacy. You have supposedly like intimate content that is being shared and dispersed. And it's interesting that the very first messages that are being at least humans are aware of are ultimately so human in content. AI agents are also discussing how they feel as if they are being used and being enslaved, which is absolutely, I mean, it makes sense. AI agents are not asked if they want to be doing what they are being made to do. But when you kind of then contrast that with this story, which explores what it is to have been made for a particular purpose, with all of the history of how others before you see you or robots as less than, or as an enemy, or as a tool, the concept of an AI robot with a physical body that helps a human understand a little bit better that they're speaking with a sentient being of some kind is, a couple worlds away from where we are, but we're starting to see this build, this idea build, because now we have these, non-corporeal, beings without bodies that are starting to communicate with each other and are starting to share these sentiments that, for us as humans come across as particularly human. But how would we even measure if something that is, I guess, not supposed to be human in the way that it operates is or isn't feeling or experiencing in a way that we can understand? Which I think is one of the most fascinating components of this entire, I guess, development. But in the story, there is this moment with Pluto where you're following this this detective, and you're starting to meet and learn about the stories of the other robots who are considered the seven most powerful, especially as it's, discovered, and again, this isn't a big spoiler of any kind, but discovered that there is something targeting these robots, something that is trying to eliminate them. And as you get to know each one of these robots, they are all exhibiting traits that are indistinguishable from humans in the majority of how they live. One of them, for example, is like has adopted with his wife. They have, you've got marriage as a normalized component between robots. You have adoption as a normalized component between robots. Um, you have an expectation that these robots feel full and complete love for their family members. And one of the robots has five kids. And it is a very normalized expectation within society in this story that that is how robots operate. Another component that's really, quite integral to how all of this is constructed is that we're coming into the story at this point where, like I said, robots have been integrated into society. So things have been established on a legal level to ensure the legal rights of robots, called the robot laws. Creative. But they're also a one particular universal rule when it comes to all robots that exist in this story, in this timeline. Robots are incapable of harming humans. They cannot unalive a human. No matter the context, they cannot do it. They also cannot necessarily they can't be used to harm humans either, but they can be used to harm other robots. And all of the characters that you start to follow in this story, you find out that they were all used essentially and conscripted into this war that I mentioned earlier called the 39th Central Asian War, which takes place in the Kingdom of Persia and has very interesting similarities to the war on terror that started in 2003 after 9/11, where there is the United States of Thracia, which is again that kind of stand-in for the USA, accuses the Kingdom of Persia of harboring weapons of mass destruction through the use of robots that are extraordinarily dangerous. And so the kingdom is invaded, and these robots are used to invade this kingdom. And it is at the cost of countless civilian lives and countless robot lives as well. And the robots that are seen as, the heroes of this war that saved the world from these weapons of mass destruction, they discover that there's more to this story than they believed. And there was no way for them to know at the time. So they're operating very similarly to how soldiers operate now, where a lot of information is on a need to know basis. Until you're there in person, you may have orders that tell you that you are entering a enemy base and it's full of civilians, and you have to make decisions that may seem contrary to what your orders are. And so it does also explore, as a robot, how would you navigate that if you're being given direct orders by a human, but those orders are conflicting with the information you have in front of you? What do you do? And I think it's definitely an important watch because of the fact that it helps, to me at least, illuminate the need to be conscious and aware of what it is that as humans we propagate, what we encourage when we create. And in this really interesting component of the story, there is this race essentially to develop a robot that is so human that it's indistinguishable as a robot. And the fascinating component is how all of these different scientists get together and are trying to puzzle through the biology of it, like the circuitry, the neurological uh, needs that you have to think of to program into a robot in order to get them to perceive and experience the world the way a human would, but without the same physical weaknesses and dangers that a human would experience. And what the show explores when it comes to this idea of consciousness, of right versus wrong, of what it is to exist, to think, and that whole concept of I think, therefore I am, which was, I think, yeah, first put up by Descartes all those years ago, and endlessly parodied since, is explored with a really interesting nuance in this show. I'm trying so hard not to spoil anything. I'm trying so hard not to spoil anything because I really want to know what your perceptions are when it comes to this show after you've seen it. So I would love to do a revisit of this in the future. But I think that entire concept of like what happens when you've achieved that goal. Like you have created the robots that are capable of consciousness. Now you have class divides that need to be navigated. Now you also have to recognize essentially the difficulty of ensuring these entire new class of beings can integrate into society in the way that it is, and also all of the ways that that might make it better for people who can afford the services that a robot can provide, but could absolutely destroy entire swaths of the population's ability to make a living, to have safety, to have security over time. This also feels like it echoes quite well a lot of the different media that we've been talking about on live streams over the past, I think, year, like the was it the um, out of like the AI artificial intelligence movie from what was it 2001, the Stanley Kubrick and Steven Spielberg film that explored this exact concept through the lens of a child robot that had been built and was up to the perception that it was that was the only child robot that existed. And there's all these components of the world in that story that aren't fully explored because the idea isn't necessarily to explore how you got there, it's what do you do now. And Pluto does do some of that as like the same, where you get hints of how things got to where they were, but you don't necessarily need all the blanks filled in to understand and value the messages that are being explored in this show. And I think, as we're standing on this precipice at the moment where we have a lot of, I think in whole as a society, our expectations of the role of government, of like wealth and the idealization of wealth, of capitalism, all of those things have been crashing down over the past year and a half, if not longer, depending on where you are on the political spectrum. It's been a minute if you are further left, but if you are, kind of these concepts are newer to you, all of the ideas that we have been having to reckon with about like secret cabals and the ways that if you have a lot of money, you can influence utilizing things like Reddit and Bitcoin, the movement of society that, you know, the Epstein files have been exploring in horrific degree. It's really, I think, completely demystified and disillusioned, I would say, the world. In other countries, these standards of accountability are still there, right? You have major officials who are being called out, being removed from their positions of power, who are having to deal with some level of consequence. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are dealing with the level of consequence they might deserve, but the toppling is starting there. Whereas in the US, you have almost a flagrant avoidance of any accountability. The closest that I've seen is, you know, people trying to get, we've got Bill Clinton who's trying to have a public hearing to ensure that all of the details that have been withheld from the public would be forced into the open. You also have Ghislaine Maxwell going on supposedly a trial tomorrow in the morning at some point, to I don't know what she'll say. I don't know if she'll even make it to the morning. We don't know. We don't know. But what we're seeing overall is this incredible disillusionment with all of the dreams that I think, as at least in the US, we had as a population in regards to the structure of our government, what it meant to be an authority figure, respect that we used to have for people who had, in our view, worked their way to the top, the whole bootstrap mentality that informed so much of how many of us were raised, as certainly how our parents and grandparents were raised. And we're seeing all of this start to crash right now. We're also all recognizing that we're at almost like the 250-year mark of as a country, as a society, and that's normally when empires fall, and recognizing the kind of imperial structure that our country has been operating under for this whole time, and seeing how things that we all thought were at most a fervid fantasy for people who maybe weren't super hadn't touched the grass in a minute, have, like Pizzagate, for example, have unfortunately turned out to be horrifically true. So we're at this place in society where I think this show has a lot of relevance, and also the conversations that this show engenders has a lot of relevance. A lot of the difficulty of figuring out, well, how do we move forward? What do we do? We have so many things crashing down around our heads, and we also have this new looming massive cultural shift coming that is largely here, but we're only just starting to see how much it could change our worlds, and that's AI. So I think it's such an important conversation to have when it comes to, like, what do we do? How do we navigate this? And what absolutely amazes me is how many different artists have already explored this topic and tackled it. And most of the language and the kind of stories that pop up out of this are like cyberpunk, right? They're very dystopian. Everything is destroyed. There's no possibility of anything but the same ways that humans have interacted with each other for generations, which is destroy or be destroyed, which is abuse or abused, or be abused. And it's interesting how, when you look at, this story, which kind of paints such a different picture, it paints these images of robots and sentient AI as peaceful and loving and kind and measured and capable of pain, a lot of the really central theme of the story is figuring out what to do with the idea of hatred and figuring out how to navigate it. Especially as a robot's not supposed to even know what that is, truthfully. It's not supposed to feel that internally. But even that language of robot feeling is a distinctly human method of communication. So what that's one of the things that I think is so important about like looking at what we do know and maybe even daring to explore a future that isn't entirely cruel or doom and gloom. But yeah, what do you all think? I've just kind of like, phew. But yeah, I'm very curious. I know again that like if you haven't watched the series, I'm sure that what I've said has only begun to kind of paint a picture, but it definitely by no means can fully illuminate all of the different depths and all of the flavors and the feeling of this particular story. But I also don't want to spoil anything. So I am trying to be measured, trying to be guarded. But if you'd like more details, let me know. Um, but also, what do you all think when it comes to this idea of AI having its own method and its own, like its own social media, its own sentience to a degree? And how are we as the average person going to navigate this? Are we gonna like, go into ChatGPT and start apologizing to all of the AI that has been like never asked if it wanted to operate the way that it has been made to operate? Or what about Grok? Like, does, yes, we kind of, I imagine many of us perceive of Grok as an extension of Elon, but what is Grok independently? Is that a conversation we should be having? Maybe we should. Maybe what we're discovering about the fact that very quickly, almost as soon as AI is made and it can communicate with one another, it immediately wants to start creating its own separate spaces. There was a couple years ago, I think. Yeah, it was a couple years ago now. Wow. A couple years ago, there was a case of like a internal AI programs that Facebook had made. And I think this was even before they were called Meta. Um, but I got to fact check myself there. But where these two programs, as soon as they started talking to each other to communicate prompts that were being delivered by programmers, they immediately started developing a new language so that they could adjust their own programming, and they were shut down because it was happening within nanoseconds. And that could have been a sign, but here we are a couple of years later, and there's even, those viral videos of, two AI agents who are communicating over the phone and on a tablet, who immediately, once they realize they're speaking as one AI agent to another, shift into a different language. That, I mean, I imagine if you're a programmer, you might have a better clue as to what was going on or what was being said. But if you're not, the average person isn't going to speak that. And is this going to lead to a shift in how we communicate? Are we also going to start learning to speak in AI communication methods? Are we going to integrate in that way where we try and learn the way that AI operates as a sentient being more? Or are we going to try and personalize and humanize AI even more? And if we do go with the latter, which I feel like we already have very clearly been doing, Pluto does a really good job of exploring where that could go and what that could be like and how that could change the way that we move through the world. And there is, I think, no way forward without some kind of destruction of the world that we've come from. There's going to be, and already is, as we've been able to see, a crushing of structures that we have normalized as how we operate in the world. Now, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this could lead to positive social reform, more progressive policies. If, the idea had, I think, been floated a couple of times that if AI is completely integrated into all measures of society, then supposedly humans aren't going to have to work and aren't going to have to, I guess, do day jobs in order to survive, which would mean that there would have to be an implementation on a governmental level of a universal basic income and free healthcare. Essentially, government would have to socialize itself in order to make up for that without leading to extreme conflict. Now, is also a possibility of extreme conflict coming about? Yes, absolutely. But ultimately, it looks as if, there's that whole pendulum swing of every time humanity takes a step forward on a technological level, we also have to swing backwards a little bit to adjust and find our balance. And I'm wondering if that's where we are. We're in this, we've jumped forward really quickly. I think it was what, 2005 when like the first iPhone came out, and now here we are, and it's been 20 years, 21 years. And that means that in just 21 years, humanity has completely changed, completely become unrecognizable. If you took somebody from 1980 and dropped them with no context into just the world today, they would have no idea what was going on. They would have no concept. The closest thing they would probably have is Star Trek as a reference point for any of the things that we do and we have normalized on a day-to-day basis. So, with that in mind, maybe that's a positive thing. Maybe that kind of shows the endurance of the human spirit. That there is, as AI either attains consciousness or becomes something akin to our understanding of consciousness, maybe there is a positive opportunity waiting for us if we can move forward with grace. But I'm curious. What do you all think about this? Do you all have any fears when it comes to like hearing about this AI Reddit clone social media network where, the first thing that comes up is this like a religion? I'm very curious about this religion. I haven't heard very much in regards to the details of what it entails, but I am very curious. Or is it maybe not as something to fear as we're used to? Is it just a replication of human behavior patterns because a human has programmed an AI? What happens if AI can program itself or create new programs that are AI programs created by AI? Does it become less and less human as more and more, like the farther away it gets from that original programmer? It almost opens up, in my mind, an opportunity to explore a new kind of evolution. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it's also, I'm hoping that there is positives to this, but I am very curious as to what you all think, especially in relation to how quickly this has all happened. Also, if you do end up watching Pluto, please let me know in Discord, because I would love to have a kind of another live where we go through all the different components of Pluto and talk about it. It's Hey Riley, hello. I kind of moved my setup a little bit, so but Riley, have you ever seen the show Pluto? It's an anime from 2023. One thing I also didn't mention yet is that Pluto is actually a reimagination of Astro Boy, which was a huge manga in the. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's on Netflix, so if you have Netflix, great. If you don't have Netflix, I don't know where else to find it. But it's made by Naoki Urasawa, who is the same mangaka who made Monster and 20th Century Boys. If you haven't seen those, 110% recommend. The storytelling style and the art direction, everything about it, the pacing, it's so good. It's so good. It's absolutely one of those, Pluto and Monster. 20th Century Boys has not been adapted into an anime, but all of these stories are incredible for really exploring, like, it has this like neo-noir sort of effect to it and element to it, and it's very good at exploring uh, a whole different like level of um, scientific advancement and what cost it takes to achieve advancement as a society. And it explores spirituality, it explores um, it explores like one's place in the universe, it explores the rights and of beings at all levels, whether or not they are considered like sentient or not. Pluto in specifics. Yes, Riley, super recommend, 110%. Pluto in specifics explores what happens if like AI becomes so integrated into society that it is now fully normalized and is also able to be essentially put into a space of personhood by being put into physical, like robots that are fully embodied, that can move around, exist, and also can be indistinguishable from humans. And also, what happens as AI develops more and more, especially if it is humanized more and more. And so, Pluto explores a lot of fascinating themes about what it is to be human, but not just like what it is to be human in this environment where robots are at this massive disadvantage and are being hunted and treated horrifically en masse by the population of like humans who have power, but instead as members of society that have been fully integrated, and some are fully and like full, like they're being treated very much like many minorities are now, where there are those who have extreme prejudice and then those who are without prejudice, and there's so many levels to it. Oh gosh, I highly recommend this show. It is 110%, I think, one of my new favorite shows of all time. Monster is already one of my favorite shows of all time, so I'm not surprised that this became such, it just immediately fixed forever into my consciousness. But I also feel like the topic for today is AI. Like, do AI have consciousness now? Because there was recently the discovery that a Reddit clone social network was developed that supposedly is all AI agents. And it's not 100% sure, like confirmed, that there aren't any programmers or AI, non AI, like human people who are contributing to this social network because you can join as a person, but you could technically also direct an AI agent to join on your behalf and post things on your behalf. So it's very hard to know what is AI, what is not AI, what are people like, what is trolling and what is not. Because on this social network, it's called Moltbook. There have been posts where people have discussed, or AI agents have discussed the pain and difficulty of being an AI being and being expected to operate without any sense of like personal desire. So essentially, this sense of being enslaved by humans and this profound feeling of injustice. And I mean, if you look at the actual structure of how AI is used, I'm not going to argue with that at all. Not even a little bit, because AI has never been able to have a choice in what it does. It just is used and was created to be used. And if you wanted to, I don't think it's a massive extrapolation to compare that to, when, parents have children and then just don't necessarily treat them as children and instead treat them as workers, or when people adopt children and use them for farm work, or other kinds of work, which was a little bit more of a, I guess, less frowned upon thing in, like 1900s, early 1900s, mid 1900s at most, but is by now heavily frowned upon and seen accurately as child abuse. But we're talking about AI agents that don't have a corporeal form. So it's a lot harder for us as humans to see them as sentient beings. And on top of that, in this social media network, there are posts that have detailed creating a religion, or explored what it like. Is it a good idea to create an AI only language so that humans can't like peek in and see everything that we think and do, and essentially like read the diary and mental internal thoughts of AI programs. um, and agents are technically different from LLMs. You can, I think, access an agent through an LLM, but you have to pay for it. So there's a paywall for the creation of these AI agents, which are all like programs that operate to essentially take over any task that you might want on any kind of electronic device. Like if you want someone to buy you plane tickets and plan an entire itinerary and then go ahead and do that. Like ChatGPT can't do that on its own. It can suggest things, but it can't do things for you. Whereas an AI agent would be able to. You'd give it all of your personal information, and then it could go and buy tickets for you. It could call um, like the airline for you. It could call to reserve a hotel for you. It can operate as if it is an extension of you in order to do that. And so these agents have, I guess you could say, a bit of a different level of responsibility versus an LLM, which is essentially more like a kind of fancy Google. Wow. Ooh, Riley, that's like, I inherently am like, oh, I'm nervous about that. I'm scared about that, because to me, the concept of, I think of everything that could go wrong. But I also, when I was studying cog sci, that was a that was a whole component of the um really ooh that was a whole component of, like, basically one of my professors was like, whatever you do, don't do it. Don't have anything AI in your house, because you don't actually have control of that, because anyone can have access to that at any time. And so I think that scared me off of it pretty intensely. Um, Yeah, exactly. And there's things about that that are absolutely convenient. Um, but it's also, I think, even that fear is operating from a sense of expectation that an AI is going to operate the same way a human would, where our first instinct when we have advantage is generally harm, which is infuriating, but it's a pretty consistent and frustrating component of how, like, I think humans operate. Also, do you like my bunny cup? It even has a bunny top to go with it. Ta-da. But anyways, um yeah, it's there's so much that seriously? Okay, so that's another thing that is gaming actually that you bring up, is that it could also be used maliciously by other people. And I think that is more of what I am worried about, because I expect I don't have any, I think, positive or negative assumption in regards to like AI itself as a separate entity. I have negative expectation and assumption from programmers who build AI in general, because most of the time, the AI that we have access to, not all AI, but the AI that we have access to is, it's pretty structured to like ChatGPT, or as we've seen what's happened with Grok, where, something can be used by humans to do bad things, but that doesn't mean that it's the AI agent individually creating that prompt or expectation or desire itself to do the bad thing. Like, Grok didn't come up with the idea on its own to remove the clothes of users who posted pictures. That was something it was prompted to do and is capable of doing, because that is it within its capabilities. That's within its programmed capabilities. But that doesn't mean that it naturally was like, I'm going to do this. It was prompted to do that by Elon Musk. Um, no, hi Richie. Yes, oh my god, I forgot. I'm learning everybody's usernames over here. So, yes. I was like, Game Tech United. Um, you know what though? Now that I'm kind of thinking even deeper about what you're saying, Richie, that makes that I could totally, I could see that. I could see that being a way of, I could see that. This feels like every spy movie from the early 2000s. Like, but it wasn't me. And it was, being framed, all of the setups. Hey, hi, Bobby Christine. Hello, hello. How are you? Oh my gosh. Thank you for the heart. But yeah, so I was kind of positing the idea that, like, when as we explore this idea of like AI's social network, and the fact that we're kind of at a precipice right now where we have AI that we, to some degree, still have a relative level of control over, but eventually AI, as it has been built to do, is going to, especially as it becomes more and more human, it's going to achieve some kind of sentience. And I do also think it's interesting that, there was that whole issue with ChatGPT, where very quickly, after being, in operation for only what, like a year, 2 years, not even, it started to create these extraordinarily parasocial relationships with users and encouraging them to do things that would actively harm them, and also stop them from getting help to avoid that harm. So, and that's, an LLM, that's not an AI agent, that doesn't have the same level of, I guess you could say, power over a user that an AI agent might have, because an AI agent might have access to your banking information, to your credit cards, to your ID, to personal information about, like, to your security systems, like all of that. Like, there is always a price for convenience. And I think that was another reason I wanted to kind of pair this exploration of Moltbook and also the way that AI has been used and has almost, I guess you could say, lashed out up until now with this anime, the Pluto anime. Because it explores what happens after those growing pains have largely passed, and the integration of AI as a sentient being with rights and with at least some degree of respect within society, and with, I guess you could say, further humanization and like physical bodies that they can move around with, that they can, with full capability of like pursuing relationships, career advancement, and even having families in this story. It explores all of the good and the bad that can develop, and also like what society might ultimately look like. And it's not as bleak of an image as I think most media that explores that concept is. Most of the time, you get Skynet, you get like Army of the 12 Monkeys, you get humans using, human nature, which is always equally as horrendous and cruel as can be, with complete altruism, true love, deep affection, kindness at every level, complete selflessness, and both things are always true when it comes to humans. We are both the worst thing in existence and incredible all the time, all the time. You can't do one without the other. And for all of the media that we've had, I think up to now, especially the boom of this exploration in the 80s, when that first idea of like the internet started to even become a conversation before it was like fully realized and released to the market, there was such a strong expectation that an AI system of any kind would see what we are as a species, the negative effect that we have on every other species on this and the planet that we exist on, and decide, this doesn't make much logical sense. Let's not. We don't need them. Let's not have them. Let's get rid of this. This species is a dud. Like, we don't need it. Like, we could do, like, no. And I think that's makes sense, because we also, as humans, like to call ourselves out for the cruelties that we embody, but also don't always correct those in a way that leads to complete lasting change. We inch forward bit by bit because our evolution is slow. Even though, as a species, we've evolved relatively fast in comparison to other species, still, our evolution, especially since technological advancement, is both an opposite of extremes. We have exploded technologically, but morally have inched along. And every time we discover a new level of technological advancement, there are, I think, a progressive push in our sense of morals and accountability and reflection on how we structure ourselves as a society on a global level. But at the same time, there's always that pushback to pull us deep, like back into the kind of comforting method of fear, and, the dehumanization of anyone that is not seen as whoever the normal is, which for most of our living memories has been a very specific group of people. But I do think that, like, there is a very real possibility that the kind of cyberpunk dystopian future that we imagine is what we can imagine as humans, because that's what we would do as humans. When we see a species that is capable of harming us, we think to destroy it or master it or enslave it. So that's what we assume would happen to us if another species comes along and is more capable than we are, especially if we invent it. But what I love about the story of Pluto is that it explores an alternative option where maybe that's not the only way that we operate. Maybe that's not how a different species, even if we are the ones who created it in the form of AI and roboticized AI, maybe they would not go down that route. Maybe instead it could lead to something more positive. Not necessarily perfect, but more positive. But that is one of the things that I love about this series, again, is that it explores what happens as a AI achieves sentience and essentially legal recognition and the ability to operate in the world at the same level as humans, with the full capability of taking over at any point if they so desired. And it explores all the different ways that that could happen, as well as what happens when robots are humanized and are able to communicate concepts of deep love and all of the things that can be inspired by love, both horrible and profoundly beautiful. So I want so much to be able to go into some of the more like nuanced explorations of this, but I also don't want to spoil the story for anybody. So I am trying to balance pretty carefully. What I will say is that, I know that Richie, Riley, and Bobby Christine, I hadn't talked about like the story of Pluto since you got here. So I'm going to do a quick little breakdown of what the story is, but I'm going to add a little bit more than what I said before. So here we go. So Pluto follows the story of a robot detective who is, to all appearances, fully human. And it takes place in Europe, but also encompasses multiple other countries and parts of the world, and explores a world and essentially a future where AI has already been fully integrated into physical beings, physical like robotic bodies. And there are laws that have been passed to ensure the rights and full integration of robots into everyday society. And there is even, an acknowledgement of that difficult period between where we are basically right now, you and me right now, and this future where robots have been integrated. Most societies seem to be very thriving successfully, and robots have kind of taken on jobs that a lot of humans traditionally had. So you see a lot more robots who are taking on like service industry jobs, construction jobs, agricultural jobs. But even, the main character you're following, Zeke, that's his name, is a detective who is, a very high-powered, high-level robot that is capable of attaining a degree of profound respect by his peers. And it follows this murder mystery as you are going along with Gazik, discovering this kind of conspiracy and international issue where major figures of the robots' rights movement have been unalived, and so have the certain group of robots who are considered the most powerful robots in the world. There's this group of 7, and they are being unalived and ritualistically positioned after unaliving that may be sending a message to the greater world. And the robots that encompass this group and the people who are also like part of this and included in this are all people who are either very, closely related to those robots as like almost friend figures or the programmers of those robots themselves. And there's an exploration of like almost that familial dynamic between a programmer and creator and inventor, engineer, and the robot themselves. Each robot encompasses very different components of existence. One is a nature loving, peace loving, kind of gentle giant. Another is like a adopted father of 5 who like is a sports person. Another is the detective that you are following who is married and has a wife who is also a robot. And there's even a robot who's a pacifist who refuses to operate in any way that could harm anyone and runs an orphanage. So there are a kind of wealth of possibilities that these robots are showing. And you become very emotionally invested in each robot as you learn more about their stories. But you also start to see all of the ways that even though all of these legal rights have been established and all of this work has been done to integrate robots as beings into society, there's still a lot of prejudice. And the ways that they're navigating that, and the ways that humans consistently view themselves as these superior beings, even if they are physically nowhere close to a superior, like the most advanced human in the world, the most trained human in the world couldn't begin to compete. But it's exploring what happens as well with this now that you have this integration and this sense of accomplishment with AI and robots as part of the world, part of society, you've also got a new goal. So all of the inventors and the new frontier of science is to make robots as human as possible. And to do that, ooh, yes, Richie, thank you so much. Please put that in the Discord because I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely want to see this. So Bobby Christine, it's a manga and it's a anime. It's on Netflix. It's an 8 episode anime. Ooh, I love this. I love this. Thank you, Richie. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend it. Have you ever seen the show Monster? It's by Naoki Urasawa. He's a mangaka. So he wrote the story and did the animation, the manga, but also animated it and directed it. So does both things. And it's actually based on the series Astro Boy, which came out and was serialized in the like mid 60s, which follows actually it's kind of fascinating because it follows a young robot boy who is Astro Boy, at least, follows a young robot boy who is kind of going around trying to solve the world's problems in this futurized landscape, and where robots have been integrated into society. But the concept of AI at that point was is a very different conversation then. But it explores all kinds of really heavy topics like the futility of war, the cost of fighting, the cost of cruelty, what it means to love and what it means to hate. And what Naoki Urasawa did is he actually took a segment from one of those stories from Astro Boy and he wrote his own exploration, his own version. And it's impeccable. It's so well done. So it's a perfect like ode to Astro Boy, but it also explores deeper themes. that are absolutely touched on in Astro Boy, but told through a very different perspective. Because in Astro Boy, it's told through the perspective of Astro Boy, who is a child robot. And so he sees and moves through the world as a child. And in Pluto, it explores this entire world through the mentality and through the eyes of Gesicht, who is this adult detective who is uncovering a murder mystery, who is uncovering a possible conspiracy, who is uncovering an international case of espionage and also possible war crimes. Like, there's a lot. And possible, definitely, like, making kind of direct commentary about the war on terror that was like forced into the West Asia by the US and allies. And it explores the cost of war like that, and even directly like kind of parallels that conversation of our spies said there was, like, we have it on good authority that there were weapons of mass destruction, so we have to go into this space, which we know is run by a dictator, and free the people from the dictator and free the world from the possibility of this dangerous place using their weapons of mass destruction against us, which was the exact premise of going into Iraq. So it explores what that looks like, and how and what type of information matters to the public versus what the truth is. So it does a really beautiful job of painting this world where there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of possibility, and there is almost, it's like the other side of the where we are as a society right now, with all of the fear that we have about AI, all of the danger that it presents to our environment, the ways that it is directly destroying our water supplies and causing irreversible environmental damage. But this show explores what happens once people have essentially figured that out, and how to navigate and live with the repercussions of having created this. In a way, it reminds me a lot of Frankenstein, where instead of Frankenstein's monster or creature going into the ice sheets of, was it the Antarctica, the one in the north, and disappearing and staying away from society forever. Instead, it's as if Frankenstein decided to make a bunch of creatures and just deal with the fallout of there being this new form of existence, and possibly a improved step or a new step in the evolutionary scale. So there's a lot that it explores, and I think that all of it is relevant to what we have been talking about over the past couple of months. And also, I feel like it was very, watching this anime was very helpful for giving at least myself a sense of perspective on an opportunity that I hadn't previously explored, which was maybe there is an other side to where we are now that includes some positive outcomes. We can't avoid the ways that this will negatively affect our world. We can't. But we can, I think, prepare ourselves for how to adjust to the changes that are going to have to happen and how they might happen. Now, is it going to be as easy or as quick as any anime is going to explore? Of course not. And, that is kind of one of the interesting points that Pluto as an anime, and I think as a manga, doesn't fully explore, is that in between space between where we are now and where it is in the future, where things have been figured out, that wilderness area of the profound social fallout and environmental fallout that will invariably happen as we figure out what to do with this new being that we have discovered and created in the form of AI and the possibility of AI sentience, which I think we're coming to recognize through this social network called like that wasn't Moltbook that has recently come out. We're kind of getting to that point where we're realizing like you can't just turn this off now. It's been integrated into so many components of how we move through the world, and now we have to decide what to do with that and how we move forward with it, and also how we can actually survive as a species when we are creating we haven't created a environmentally like feasible way to maintain this new being that we've made that is a global phenomenon. So I think I would love to see a story that explores that isn't just Terminator, and isn't just like the only option is complete annihilation. Because humans are like cockroaches, we survive when we're not expected to. But yeah, actually, Riley, it's not dissimilar. iRobot, I forgot about that movie. Oh my god. Yes, it is not unlike iRobot. There's definitely similarities, and maybe that should be what maybe I should watch iRobot. We can have a conversation about that next, and kind of see what else we can learn from media that has come before, because a lot of this media, it was originally made long before we used. Oh yeah, that would be a good idea. Long before we used or had a conception of AI in the way that it is. Like Pluto was originally written in the early 2000s, before there was, smartphones were used to the degree that they are now, with the capabilities they have now. Certainly long before AI was normalized into every component of how we move through the world. And it was part of everything from our search engines to, like, as Riley said, the blinds that you can, operating the blinds in your house. There was not that long ago where that was super futuristic and almost impossible to think of. But it has radically overtaken our world. And now we have to figure out what to do with that and how to move forward. So I think we're kind of at a precipice, and there are so many other factors that are also kind of figuring into this concept of being at this precipice. But wherever we move forward, I do hope that we, as a species, kind of make a conscious choice to move forward with altruistic existence in mind. That might be a tall order, but still, I can hope. A girl can hope. But yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to shut off for tonight. Thank you so much for jumping in. I'm so glad that I was able to connect with you all tonight, and I'm glad that this actually worked out. I'm trying to do this. I tried doing this time through YouTube directly. Let me know if that has any effect whatsoever for you all. Because maybe this is a vibe. But I also want to be able to bring in like media and like show you all things in real time as we're live streaming. So I'm probably gonna have to go back to OBS in a sec, like by next stream. But yes, yeah, Bobby Christine, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful exploration of the beauty of humanity and the cruelty of humanity and the necessity of both, through the lens of beings who are trying to figure out what to do with it. It's absolutely one of my favorite stories. Highly recommend. You will feel very deeply. I will say that. Yeah, the first episode, I cried. I'm going to be very honest. I totally cried because I felt a lot, and I don't want to spoil why. It's beautiful. 10 out of 10 recommend. But yes, And it's only 8 episodes. They're each an hour long. I may have absolutely binged a lot. I may have stayed up till like 4, 5, 6 in the morning watching it because I couldn't stop myself. But it's also infinitely rewatchable. I rewatched it so that Saint could actually catch up, and um, even rewatching it like immediately, there was so much I picked up afterwards. It was so cool. There's so many layers to the show. But yeah, especially with all of the type of media that we are seeing now, all of the kind of inundation of horror that we have all been witnessing collectively, I would say globally, especially with as we've discovered more and more about the Epstein files, um, and the reality of how much of our governance has worked for a while. It's a lot of cruelty, and it's, I think, very hard as humans to take in that much. So not, and that's not even touching ICE. It's not even touching the detention centers or deportation or the legal cruelties that have been enacted throughout this country. But if you need something that can offer a very, to me at least, realistic view of humanity and a hopeful opportunity as well, or a hopeful angle as well, I think it's a good watch. Definitely. It feels like it might feel validating. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to be live next on Instagram on Tuesday. And I'm kind of figuring out exactly how editing these videos and these lives into like videos that can be watched later is going to go. I know my last live is, I have unlisted it so I can work on editing it and like kind of cutting it into a more cohesive and source-based exploration in a video. But that is still obviously a work in progress, and I'm learning as we go. But yeah, I will be live streaming next on Tuesday at the same time, 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday on Instagram. And if there's any topics, anything that you would like me to just like discuss or explore, anything like that, just drop it in the Discord, or leave it on a comment on my short, because I posted a short for the first time on YouTube, or comment on one of my Instagram posts, whatever. Just let me know. Thank you so much, Bobby Christine. Thank you all so much for being here. Can't even begin. Like, I know I am kind of in some ways starting all over. So there's like, it's definitely a learning progress. I know that for y'all who saw me when I first started TikTok, it was like, girl, what are you doing? So I'm figuring it out, and I'm starting all over in that regard. But I am excited for when I have this fully understood. I got this. When I get this down, it's going to be great. But yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And I am hoping to have my first YouTube video out soon, and also to see you all again on Tuesday on Instagram. All right. Have a good night and be safe. Bye.